Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for taking time to join us for today's webinar. So if you haven't noticed, in the Zerion Software Community Center, we do have a section where you can actually go in and submit some of your forms and submit some of the forms that you're having trouble with. And John will go through those and choose which ones he thinks would be a great presentation for the webinars. And if he chooses yours, then he helps you out essentially. And with that, let's go ahead and talk through some of the other upcoming events that we have or some of our blogs that we've had recently. The first blog post is our Data Management Digest. This is a great article that we strongly suggest that you check out. This is available by going to zerionsoftware.com and then going into the blog section. In the community, you can always see what's going on and any of the new topics, as well as vote on some of the topics that you think are prevalent and something that you want to see happen within the platform, as well as seeing what's going on and what we're brainstorming with as a community internally. We also have posts that go to Medium blogs. Medium is a type of blog post that we have. So there's the Zerion Engineering as well as the Zerion Customer Success Center or Zerion Customer Success. So the Zerion Engineering will focus primarily on the engineering side of software, and it will be written by our Zerion software engineers. Whereas the Zerion Customer Success Medium blogs are going to be posted all by our customer success team and focus on what we find as relevant and helpful in what we do on the day-to-day basis.
Thanks, Barrett, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. As Barrett mentioned in the introduction, this webinar is going to be focused on allowing me to connect with the community a little bit more closely. As Barrett had mentioned, what happens here is people are going to be submitting forms and posting that to the community, and then what I'm doing is I'm selecting from these forms and then I'm taking one and I'm building it each month. So that's the format of the webinar. Before I get into the actual form building, I did want to talk a little bit more about the format of this webinar, how you're able to participate and how you're able to stay engaged and allow your form building skills to grow. So as I had mentioned, the first and the best way to participate here is to go ahead and post form requests on the community forum. There was a link in the first slide up here. So when we finish up this webinar, we're going to be sending a copy of the recording as well as any materials to you all. So if you jump into this PDF, you're able to get to the community straight away. But submitting form requests is a great way for you to see what it would look like for your forms to be put onto our platform. We're able to communicate to you how moving on to a mobile platform or moving your paper forms to a digital platform is going to enhance your data collection experience. In addition to requesting forms to be built on the community forum, I also recommend that you register for these webinars every month. So this is actually the second webinar we've done this month. The first one was in February, and we're going to be doing these webinars the second Tuesday of every month. And so you can go to the same link every single time, register for this month's webinar, and then continue to stay engaged and learn how to build forms each time. I'm being very intentional when I choose forms to make sure that we have a wide spread of different contexts as well as also different form building techniques and strategies to make sure that if you tune in every single time, there should be something new for you to learn. While you're inside the webinar, feel free to ask questions. Barrett's going to be fielding those. Sometimes she'll be answering them independently. Other times she'll throw the question to me so that I can give the answer to the rest of the audience. But also afterwards, if you have more questions that you think of, feel free to post those in the community as well. You're also welcome to reach out to us individually through email. And then finally, if listening to this webinar stirs some thoughts or some questions that you may have, you're always able to very easily reach out to us, whether that's going to be through our sales group, our support group, the Zerion community, or also we have online chat that's available most hours of the day in order for you to get quick questions answered. Now, with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into what we're going to be doing today for the form building. So what we have here is actually a very general form. I took out a lot of the identifying information for this form so that we're able to use it in a wider range of contexts. but this form is based on the idea of having an asset and wanting to register that asset. Now, in discussions with the owner of this form, one of the things we talked through was the addition of introducing barcode scanning as a portion of their solution. And so I also want to walk you through the capabilities of iFormBuilder and handling barcode scanning as well. Now you'll see if we look through this form, we'll start top down, we'll do an overview of the form, and then we're going to get into building it. You have very basic information such as the auditor's name, the date in which this is being registered, and then your asset number. That's where we're going to look into a barcoding solution. The first iteration of this form I built in the beginning is not going to have that barcoding solution. I'm going to add it in as a second iteration towards the end of the webinar. When we initially register the asset, we're also going to mark its condition as one of 4 options: repair, poor, good, or excellent. And then finally, we also want to identify the different actions that are going to be necessary. This is going to be a set of 6 options that are available. We're able to choose multiple options from this list. And then as you see below, there are going to be sections that are filled out conditionally depending on the actions that were chosen. So let's go ahead and go into our form builder. Now what I have here is I've opened up my iFormBuilder control panel, and I'm going to be going under Forms and going to the Form Builder. Now for those of you who have experience with iFormBuilder and you may be using the Classic Builder currently, I highly recommend you get used to using this new builder because the Classic Builder is actually going to be retired very soon. The new builder has a lot of new functionalities and features that are actually going to speed up your form building process once you get comfortable with it. Inside of here, let's go ahead and create a new form by clicking in the upper right corner, and I'm going to label this form Asset Registration. I'm going to put the date here as well. And you'll notice that the table name is going to be copied based on my form's label, and that's because I have this checked off here. Now what I want to do for this webinar is I'm going to uncheck based on label, and I'm going to clean this up just a little bit so that it's a little neater. I'm going to scroll down here and click on Create, and this is going to load up my device view in the form builder. Now there's 3 main sections here. The first section on the left is where I'm able to add one of the over 30 different elements that we have available inside of iForm. The middle is going to be a list or a view of each of the different elements that's displayed on my form. An element is a basic building block of a form. You can think of a form as being made up of elements, each element being a data collection point. And finally, on the right-hand side, we have the properties for each element. You'll see that there are common properties, which will be universal no matter what element you choose, as well as properties specific to that element's type. And then we have more advanced configurations below. In the upper right corner, we're able to save our form. We're able to edit the form level properties. We can write some custom JavaScript if you need to do that. It's not something we'll be covering on today's webinar, but it's a topic that is definitely talked about a lot. It's something I'll be covering on a future webinar, and it's one of the things that separates iFormBuilder from a lot of the other data collection softwares available, in that you're able to access the entire JavaScript library and really create very powerful forms. And then finally, if you do want to, you are able to delete your form over here. Just be really careful with this. You'll notice that there's a pop-up message that says this is a permanent deletion. It's also going to delete the data that you have associated with that form if you were to do this. So going and building this form, if we look over here, let's start with these first 4 sections. So we're going to have a name, a date, the asset number, and then the condition. We'll start by adding a name. What we're going to do here is we're going to add a text element for the name. We're going to say inspector's name. And one of the things I like to do here is I'm actually going to scroll down here to my dynamic value, and I'm going to give this element a default input. So the dynamic value is what controls the actual value inside of this element. What I want the element to do is to default to my current first and last name. I'm going to do that using some of our built-in functions. iFormBuilder first name would be my first name, Jonathan. I'm going to use the plus sign to concatenate, which means I'm basically gluing this together. So I'm adding to my first name an empty space, and I'm going to add to the end of this my last name. Now, one of the things I also recommend you do while you build forms is to save pretty frequently. And I'm also going to take this opportunity to jump over to my device, sync my device, and we'll take a look at this form with just a single element on it. So after I've synced my device, I'm going to open up this form. And you'll notice that my first name pops in here. Now, because I set this as a text element, I am able to jump in here and edit this value. So this is only the initial starting value. So if I want to change it, I can do that. If for your form building needs, you wanted this field to not be able to be edited, we do also have a read-only element. In that scenario, my name would be shown there and I wouldn't be able to change it. It's a really good way of capturing data that you don't want modified. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a date next. I'm going to click on the date element. I'm going to call this today's date. And I'm going to give a dynamic value for this as well. So I want this to default to the current date. And I'm going to do that using this syntax. Now, one of the questions we get very frequently is, how am I supposed to know what to type into all of these dynamic values? Some of this is JavaScript. For example, this text here is a JavaScript command. What I typed in the dynamic value earlier is actually an iFormBuilder built-in function. So it's something specific to iFormBuilder. And my answer for learning how to fill out these forms and how to build these forms is twofold. The first thing is continue doing what you're doing right now, which is watching these webinars, continuing to learn and grow your skill set. The second thing is to get very comfortable with the Customer Success Center, which is our knowledge base. There's a lot of very good documentation on there. All you have to do is ask a question in the top bar, and you should be able to pull up the articles that correspond to that question. In the event you can't find what you're looking for, feel free to jump on the chat and then ask for a little bit of guidance, and we'll be able to help you that way as well. Let's go ahead and add in another text element for the asset number. And again, we're going to eventually modify this into a barcode solution. But we're going to just do that for now. And then finally, we want to do the condition. Now, one of the things I want to do is talk about how we handle this type of a data point, which is specifically a data point that has a predefined set of values. Inside of iFormBuilder, we call this an option list. And an option list is going to allow you to set values that are chosen from in a list system. The great thing about splitting out these lists as an option list is that you can then use that list across multiple forms. You can also use that same list within one form multiple times. We have a lot of groups who do inspection forms, and a lot of the questions are simply pass, fail, or not applicable. You don't want to make that data point over and over and over and over again. Create the list one time and then associate that list with each option-based element. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a select element to our form. The reason I'm using the select element is because the select element is going to show on the screen in line, which is going to allow it to be filled out very quickly. It's also going to be the appropriate option-based element for a shorter list. And actually, I would say 4 is probably the best number to use as a threshold. Anything greater than that, and we may want to consider using what's called a pick list for a longer option list. So let's call this condition scores. Whoops, sorry, we're going to click on create list, and then we're going to call this condition scores. We're going to choose my option list. Now, because I'm making a brand new list, this is going to be empty currently. Now, the label is going to be the text that you see on the device, whereas the key value is going to be the text or the value that is stored in the database. In this scenario, I want these to match one another. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type repair, and I'm actually going to modify my key value as well. I can do a plus sign. Let me fill out the rest of these. And while I'm filling these out, Barrett, I wanted to check in to see if there were any questions that have come through that I might be able to answer.
John, there have been some great questions coming through, but I vetted all of them since they seemed a little bit more personal project specific.
Okay.
But I think for now we are good to go.
Perfect. So I've made the changes to my option list. I've created this and defined each of the different values. And you'll notice that the background is yellow. I'm going to go ahead and save this so that my changes have been logged. And then I will click on Assign Selected. And you'll notice that this name is here. Let's take this opportunity to save my form. And you'll notice that I got an error here. And this is I did this on purpose. I planned this out. This error, you'll notice it says name is a reserved word, is one of the most common form building errors we see. And what happened here is I tried to assign a name for my element that already has significance, whether that is in JavaScript, in the language of the database, or in the language of iFormBuilder. And so what I need to do is change this name, for example, I can say asset condition, so that it is not one of the reserved words. And I'll be able to save my form just fine now. Let's go ahead over to my device and sync this and take a look at what we have so far. We've built those 4 different elements out, and we'll make sure that they are all functioning as we expect. Okay, when we load this form, you'll notice that both my name, first and last, are pre-populated, as well as today's date. The asset number is something that we would be able to fill out. And then finally, this is our select element where we can choose in line the condition of our asset. Now, for those of you who are brand new, what I'm going through here is the process of filling out a form on my device. If I want to complete my record, I'm going to click on the button Done at the bottom. You'll notice I get an hourglass icon on the right side of my device. Let me move this to the middle just to make sure it's visible, right over here. That is the symbol or the icon to represent a completed record. A completed record is one that is going to be uploaded to the database once you sync your device. I'm going to pull down on my screen to sync, and you'll notice it says uploading data 1 of 1, and then once the sync is complete, it should give me confirmation that the record was uploaded. Let's continue building out our form. The next thing we're going to do is build out the actions necessary section. So these are a set of 6 different choices. Again, if you have a predefined set of values, we're going to be making an option list. And once we make this option list, we're going to go ahead and talk about which element we want to associate this with. Because this list has different set of properties, we're not going to be using our select element. What I want us to do is take a look at the option list manager. I'm going to actually right click, open this in a new tab. This is one of the best practices I share with a lot of my groups, is that you want to open up multiple tabs when you do form building. This is going to make it a lot easier to switch back and forth as I build. I'm going to create an option list here from this dedicated option list manager. In a very similar process as before, we're going to call this asset actions necessary, and click on create. Now I want to demonstrate another method for creating an option list. I already showed you how to do this label and key value. What I also want to show us how to do is to do an upload of options. Now we have 2 methods for this, a raw upload as well as a CSV upload. We're going to focus on the raw upload today. It's a little bit quicker. What I'm going to do is I'm going to type out each of the different possibilities here. And I'm going to put each one on a new line. Now, a lot of the times what will happen is you'll have these typed out already, whether that's in an Excel sheet or a Word document, and this makes it really easy to copy and paste. But once I type these all out, I'm going to click on upload. And you'll notice that it goes ahead and creates my option list for me. Now that I've made this option list, I want to jump back over to my form builder, and we're going to add this option list to my form. Now, as I said earlier, we're not going to use a select element because that's not the right type of option-based element to use. A select element is good for shorter lists with a single selection. Because we want the ability to make multiple choices within this option list, we have to use the multi-select element. So I'm going to call this actions necessary. On the right-hand side, we're going to go down to option lists, and we're going to search for my option list. We'll take a look, and we'll just do a quick scan to make sure everything looks good. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 options. Let's assign the selected element, and let's go ahead and save this. Now, before I do a quick sync and take a look at it, I do want to add one more element. We're not going to do these middle ones quite yet. We're going to do that next. What I want to do is build this one area, the additional comment section, because it's pretty straightforward. For longer text sections, what we want to do is use a text area as opposed to a text. And we're going to just call this additional comments. And now we'll save one more time, and then we're going to sync our device and take a look. Now, this process of syncing and checking, building, syncing, and checking, you want to do this as frequently as necessary. What I would say is, especially when you're a newer form builder, do this very frequently, very similar to what I'm doing right now, actually, just between 2 to 4 elements at a time. As you get more comfortable, as you get a little bit more experienced, I would say you can start to increase that number. But even myself, when I'm building out forms for projects, I do this on probably 5 elements at a time, one small change at a time, just to confirm that it's behaving as expected. So again, we have their default values at the top. We have our select element here. And now if I open up this multi-select, you'll notice that I have these 6 options and I can choose the different ones. Click on select, and then I have a section for additional comments as well. And this gives you a larger area to type text in too. Now at this point, Barrett, a real quick check. Are there any questions I'd be able to answer?
Sure. I think for some of the new folks, there have been some questions about when you're testing it out, why is it important that you fill out the form in its entirety? And then there was another question about the process of syncing the device. Do you have to make sure all the questions are answered before you sync, or how do you make it so that you can have it so that they have to complete all the questions before the sync can occur?
Those are both very, very good questions. So the first thing I'll answer is the syncing process. Whenever I'm syncing my device, which again, let me open this up, is either pressing on the sync button in the upper right corner you see here. So I can do this to sync my device. Or I could pull down on my screen like I've been doing repeatedly this way. Syncing your device is going to do 2 things. The first thing it's going to do is from the web server, so if you think about where your forms are stored and all your data is stored, it's going to download information to your device. That could be new forms, that could be assigned records, that could be an updated option list or an updated smart table search. The second thing it's going to do when you sync is it's going to take completed records and upload those to the server. So anything on the device that has been marked as complete is going to go and be uploaded so that it's stored in the cloud. Now that's the reason I pointed out the record status icon of the hourglass, because that's going to be a complete record. What I can do is I can show you what it looks like if I fill out a record partially, I didn't finish everything, and I click on save in the upper right corner. Now if I go back, you'll notice that I have a pencil icon. When I sync my device with this record in progress, what you'll notice is that record does not get uploaded. So if you haven't completed the record yet, you're able to save it as a draft. You can sync your device just fine, and you're not going to worry about uploading a partially completed record. More importantly, a record that is incomplete. Now, once you do complete this record and you press done, that's when the record will be synced when I upload it. Now, what I want us to do is to go through the process of creating a required element on my form. So over here, I'm going to say the condition of the asset is so important that it has to be filled in. We are never going to run into a scenario where it should be empty. So I'm going to mark this as required. You'll notice I get a red asterisk mark next to the label. I'm going to sync my device. I'm going to save, and then sync my device. And this time when I open up my form, you'll notice that there is an asterisk next to the word condition. If I try to submit this record, it will not allow me to. It'll save it as a draft instead, and then it'll say that that field is required. Once this field has a selection though, now I'm able to complete my record. You can mark as few or as many elements as required as you want. The main thing is you want to make sure that for fields that always have to be filled in, you mark them as required. For fields that may not be filled in, but sometimes are required, you want to leave those as not being required because you don't want to prohibit someone from submitting a record that shouldn't be flagged as being incomplete. Barrett, were there any other questions?
That's it for now, John. Thank you.
All right. So we've got two more things to do in this form. The first thing is to take our asset number and we're going to turn this into a barcoding solution. The second thing is to show the 3 if needed fields. We're going to start with the barcode because I want to make sure we get to this today. Currently as a text element, what's happening is we're having to type in the value manually. What we're going to do is we're actually going to add in what's called the Manatee Works element, and this is going to be our universal code scanner. I'm going to give this a label of scan the barcode. And now let's first set our symbologies. So a symbology is just going to be the type of code that you want. Now my recommendation is for you to look up the type of code you're trying to use, but what I want to do is check all of them and show you that actually even doing this, the performance is not hindered that bad. It's not that dramatic of a decrease. We're also going to set the scanner level to 3, which is a medium value, and I'm going to save this. Now when I sync my device, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be opening up this form, and we're going to just focus on this one element, scan the barcode. And so when I tap to scan, it's going to use the camera of my device, and what I'm able to do is grab this barcode here. It should capture it. There we go. But you'll notice that you don't see the information yet. What we're going to need to do is we're going to need to actually read off of that element and extract the barcode's value. So what I have here is my asset number. I'm going to give this a default value. Now the way we're going to do this is we're going to take the name of this element, which is barcode scan. I'm going to copy this. And in the asset number element for dynamic value, I'm going to paste it and I'm going to say dot raw. Now again, we have articles in our customer success center and our knowledge base specifically on how to implement barcode solutions. That's where you're going to be able to find a lot of the literature on how to implement this for your own use case. Let's go ahead and save this. And then we're going to resync my device and we're going to take a look at how this goes. All right, let's open up my form, scan the barcode, and there we go. We've got our asset number, and that's pulled directly from the barcode itself. And so this is how we're going to take that information and extract it and use that as part of our record. Now what we could do here is we could take this value and instead of having it be text, because we don't want to modify this value ever, we're going to change this to a read-only element. Now before I save this, I want to highlight to everyone listening here this error message, or not an error message, but this notice. So it says note, changing the element type, which I just did, the data size or the encryption for any element will cause all existing data to be deleted for that element. What that means is by changing this from a text to a read-only data type, anything I have stored in that column currently is going to be deleted. So you want to be very careful when you do this. This is one of the reasons it's extremely important to test your forms extensively before you start collecting live data. For me, I know I don't have anything valuable in this table currently, so I'm not worried about making this change. However, if I did have live data, I would do two things. One, I would back up the data that I currently have by downloading it inside the iFormBuilder control panel. The second thing I would do is actually not modify this element, but I would disable it. And I would create another element in its place with the different element type. This way I preserve my old data and I'm able to collect the new data with the new element type correctly. Let's go ahead and save this. And now finally, the last thing we're going to do today is we're going to build out the skip logic for our if necessary sections. So you'll see here, if needed, we're going to list the auditor for inspection. If needed, we're going to select the movement destination. If needed, we're going to schedule the destruction date. And these correspond to each of these three each of these three options inside my option list. Let's start at the bottom. If needed, schedule the destruction date. So this would be a date data type. Real quickly, I'm going to add my date element underneath my multi-select. I'm going to call this scheduled date for destruction. And I don't know when I cut out. I don't know if anything I said about condition value was caught, but I'm just going to go ahead and start from the beginning to make sure that I'm clear with my explanation. So your condition value is going to control whether the element is shown or if it's hidden, so it handles the visibility of the element. Your condition is always going to either evaluate to true or it will evaluate to false. When the condition is true, that's when the element is shown. And then if the condition is false, the element will be hidden. The great thing about this is it's going to eliminate the need for text such as, if needed, fill this out, or, if yes, skip to this question. All we're going to do is hide the questions and show the questions as necessary, so your data collector gets a much smoother experience when they fill out your forms. Now I'm going to write the command here, ZC display value _ I'm going to grab the data column name of my multi-select dot index of. Now this syntax is found on the Customer Success Center. I don't expect people to memorize this, but if you search for condition value, if you search for option list, you're going to be able to find this syntax. I also know that when we do our form building certifications, that we cover this pretty extensively working with option lists in your smart controls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the label from this option because I used the display value command. If I had used the display key command, I would want to grab my key value. So I'm going to paste this in here. And I'm going to say greater than or equal to 0. If you happen to have a programming background or you have experience coding or you've been in the form builder a lot, the syntax may not be foreign to you. If it's completely new to you though, I can go ahead and paraphrase what this says. Basically, all this is going to say is if schedule asset for destruction is found in my list of selected values, then let's show this element. So I'm going to sync my device. And I'm going to hop back over here. Oh no, my device needs to connect. 1 second. I have to connect to the backup Wi-Fi on my device as well. Hey Barrett, could you do me a quick favor?
Sure, John. What do you need?
Would you? Yeah, and would you be able to talk through the difference between the label and the key value while I do this? I don't know if you actually covered that while I was disconnected earlier.
Sure, the difference when you're in the option list, of course.
Yes.
Okay, so whenever you're building out your option list, you're going to see a little table, and in that table, you're going to see where it says sort order, you're going to see where it says label, and you're going to see where it says key value. The sort order is the order that the option is going to appear within the list that the user sees on their device, and you can change that sort order at any time. The label itself is the text that the user is going to see on their device, and then that key value is what's going to be used in the back end and be what you'll see within the database as well. We strongly suggest whenever you're doing any sort of smart controls statements with option lists that you focus on that key value so that if you ever need to change the label or the sort order, it won't impact any of the smart control statements that you've created. Do you want me to add anything else, John, or are you all set?
Nope, that's it. I'm all set. I'm good to go. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right, so what I have here is I've synced my device now. Under actions necessary, I'm going to choose schedule asset for destruction, and you'll notice that now that date is shown. Now this is going to work even if I choose other values, it'll still show. If I deselect this one, it will be hidden. So regardless of the combination of options that I pick, if this schedule asset for destruction is one of them, that date is going to be shown. Now let's go ahead and implement this 2 more times, once for the auditor that we want to inspect the record, and also to schedule the movement destination. And what we're going to do is make both of these be text elements. And this one is going to be list auditor for inspection. And then we're also going to have schedule movement destination. And now we're going to take the exact same condition value. We're going to paste it in here, but we're going to have a different value that we're looking for. Instead of scheduling asset for destruction, we want to schedule this for movement. And then for this one, we want to say schedule asset for inspection. Let's go ahead and save this. Take one final look at our form for today. Now I added both of these elements as text. If we were going to build out a more full-blown solution here, I think that it would probably be advisable that specifically for the destinations, we may want this to be a drop-down menu if you have a preset list of places to move this asset to. Another option here is for the inspection. We could actually leverage the assign to element and then take this record and assign it to that specific auditor. So they would then get this record. I think they could fill out another portion of it for that follow-up inspection. Now you notice that all 3 of these show here. If I were to remove one of them, that option is hidden. If I were to remove both of them, and so none of them are chosen now, you'll see that there's no other values to be filled out here. Just going to complete this record, sync it, and then we're going to hop back into my presentation slide to wrap up this webinar. One of the things I always like to recap with are a few best practices and strategies that we can talk through. These are going to be guiding principles for you when you build out your forms, especially as a newer form builder. The first thing is to make sure you always start with a plan, whether that's going to be documenting your different data points in a spreadsheet, or writing it out on paper, or even taking an original paper form and then writing notes on it and marking it up. Having a plan and going through that mental exercise is extremely valuable to make sure you make the right decisions the first time around with your form building. When it comes to choosing the elements, you want to make sure you find the best fit. For example, I used a select element for the condition because there were only a few options, and I used a multi-select for the actions necessary because I had to choose more than one sometimes. Both of those examples I just used were option-based elements, and that's on purpose. You want to make sure you emphasize option lists anytime you can. They're going to provide the highest level of standardization for your data collection. Another way that you're able to use option lists is they're able to be managed and used across multiple forms, so it's going to be less work for you in the long run. Make sure you test your forms early and often, like I was doing on this webinar. Make one small change or a few sets of changes, test to make sure that they work properly. And then finally, only show your elements when necessary. If you don't have to have the element shown, don't show it. That could be conditionally with skip logic. Sometimes you may want to just have an element hidden always, simply as a pass-through with your data. Barrett, one last time, are there any questions I can answer from the audience?
So there is one, and it's about the logic that you had used.
Sure.
And I'm a little confused with what they're asking, but maybe you'll have a better understanding. They said, can one use this logic if the option is on a subform? I do know what they're asking, but I'll let you answer that.
So the answer is yes. And I think that there's 2 primary scenarios here. Scenario number 1 is where you have an option-based element on the parent form, and then you want elements in the subform, also called a child form, to be conditionally shown or hidden, and that absolutely can be done. The syntax would look very similar to what I just showed you. Conversely, you could have it flipped the other way, where you have an option-based element in a subform that you want to control certain things on the parent form, in terms of maybe you want to have, there's a follow-up section that you may or may not want to show, and you want to control that based on something that happens inside of the subform. That can be done as well. The syntax is a little bit different because you have to access through the form structure to get to the specific subform record, and then that option-based element inside the subform. But I know that there are multiple articles on there that have covered that. We've also covered it on webinars before as well. So whoever is asking that question, if you have trouble implementing that, absolutely please reach out to us and we'll be able to help you with that.
All right, John, well, that's it as far as questions have gone. I think everyone's feeling pretty good on the answers. And so thank you for this presentation and thank you for this webinar. And I know I look forward to the one in the next month.